Ryan, it was absolutely stunning. It was one of those days, I think, in the history, certainly of Los Angeles sports, where you'll always remember where you were when you heard the news. I think it was that tectonic. It was that sort of paradigm altering. And for me, and we'll get into it, but whether you look at this culturally, whether you look at this athletically, whether you look at this financially, whether you look at this socially, I think it was an absolute grand slam move for both schools. And I think if you look at it from UCLA's perspective, folks don't realize their deficit in one fiscal year was $62.5 million. Their cumulative fiscal deficit from an athletics department standpoint over 3 years was over $100 million. It was a combination of paying dead money to fired coaches, COVID, and UCLA being in this very unique position where they actually have to pay rent for the Rose Bowl and for Pauley Pavilion. The combination of the Under Armour deal that was $280 million, the largest apparel deal in the history of collegiate sports. Under Armour essentially defaulting on that deal. UCLA going with Jordan Brand, but far cry between $280 million and $45 million that they got from the Jordan Brand. And just when you put all of that together, UCLA was in a situation where they either had to cut Olympic sports significantly, scale back operations in football, or go up to the chancellor's level, the university level, and the regents level to get essentially a bailout for the athletics department, but having to compete with the likes of engineering and medicine and diversity, equity, and inclusion and social initiatives and so forth. And that would have been a super uphill battle politically. And so now with one fell swoop, UCLA is now fiscally viable again. And when you put together their academic culture, their social culture, their top-notch facilities, their beautiful campus, everything that they stand for, and now they have the resources to compete at the highest level, home run grand slam situation for UCLA. And then when you look at it from SC's perspective and really focusing on football, SC always felt like this sort of cultural outlier in the Pac-12. The emphasis on football from the fans, from administration, from the athletic department, from just the overall community was much greater than really any other Pac-12 school. They really felt like a Midwestern or a Southern school, and now they get to be in that conference to be able to prove it and have an even greater platform, have even greater resources to shine. Because folks don't realize that even in the Pete Carroll days, Ryan, USC never made it to a national championship game with one or more losses. The only two times they made it to the national championship game, obviously this is pre-CFP, but still BCS era, was 2004, 2005, when they were undefeated in the regular season. And so the margin for error in the Pac-12 is just so minuscule that you get clipped anywhere, you're basically out of national title consideration. So now you get the opportunity to go head-to-head with the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Penn States, really show who's the greatest team, but you're allowing yourself a greater margin for error for success. It's a greater recruiting platform. It's a greater geographic platform for nil opportunities. It's a greater platform for even additional media rights. You put Hollywood together with all of that. Absolute grand slam for USC and for UCLA.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And before I get into my initial take, I just want to follow up on the perfection stance, because I've seen so many people, and even some of our people at LAFB, which, of course, everyone's, their opinions valued, but it's like, some of these schools have struggled winning in the Pac-12. How do they expect to go and win in the Big Ten? And it's like you said, I mean, it is, I don't care what conference you play in, it is so hard to go perfect. You have one off quarter, not even an off game. You have one off quarter where your quarterback throws two bad decisions, bad interceptions, and there goes your season in the Pac-12. Now you can have that kind of down game. I'm not promoting that, but you're afforded that in the Big Ten, and I think you're allowed. We've seen, it's been proven that Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Iowa, even if they haven't actually been in the college football playoff, they've been talked about. And there's been a lot of discussion about if they should be in. Pac-12, you have one loss, they're not even in discussion. remember the COVID season, which again, it's the COVID season. I get it. USC was undefeated, and going into the Pac-12 title game, even if they won the Pac-12 title game, it was like, yeah, no, they're not even in discussion for the college football playoff unless they rout Oregon potentially. And that just shows again that there's just the lack of respect for the Pac-12. And part of that's rightfully so. Part of that is not rightfully so, in my opinion, but this just aids in the greater chance. So my thought, though, on the initial move, Jamal, which I love, my first thing that came to mind, when is the Big Ten going to rebrand and be able to count how many teams are in their conference? You have this much.
They're going to have to call themselves the Big 16 or the Big 20 if it's headed the way, we think it's headed. That's so hilarious.
Larry Scott, with how inept he was as a commissioner of the Pac-12, at least he knew how to count past 10, because when Colorado and Utah joined, immediately they became the Pac-12. I don't get how we're still years removed from Rutgers, Nebraska, these other teams joining the Big Ten, and they're still the Big Ten. Now 2 more team up. Like, how can we expect these institutions to teach our student athletes if they can't count past 10? What's going on here, Jamal? Why are we still the Big Ten?
It's unbelievable, right, Ryan? It sort of defies logic. I think they're always afraid. I think because it's Big 10 and Big 12, and once you sort of get certain teams in there, the reality was that the Big 12 at the time only had 10 teams, and so they couldn't rebrand to the Big 10 because the Big 10 was already there. And so we got to get some mathematicians in the room here to just help these guys out.